Karen is the Secretary of Agriculture for CADFA, Secretary of Agriculture for the state of California. Is that okay? Okay. And before that, she worked for who used to be the governor of Iowa, Vilsack, who then became the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. And I know I get all these titles wrong, but she's lived for a little while in D.C. She is a Nebraskan, another wonderful Midwesterner. And she has worked on a lot of political campaigns over the years. So Karen she was appointed by Jerry Brown, whatever year that was. I've got it written here, 2011. And then she was reappointed by Newsom in 2019. Karen is often called on by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, by Secretary Vilsack, to be the ambassador person from the U.S. to many national meetings, because obviously California is pretty important to the U.S. in terms of agriculture. And that's why I think her job is particularly fun. But I do have to tell you that she had one job, excuse me, when I first met her that I thought was the perfect job in the whole wide world. She was the head of the California Winegrape Growers Association. Now, yeah. Yeah. But I still think that would be the perfect job. So I'm not going to. My mic went out.
They cut you off.
They cut me off. Karen Ross.
Is this one working? Is to tell you a little bit about myself and why I feel so lucky to do this job that I do, and doing it for so long. I am a farm girl from the western part of Nebraska. You can see Wyoming from our ranch, which means I grew up in the middle of nowhere. And I grew up, doing lots of farm chores, including summer fallow, which is the way they did things back then. Wheat, it's dry land, and it's wheat, and it's feed grains, and it's cattle. It's dry land, meaning we pray for rain. Somebody once said, is it okay to pray for rain? I was like, I don't know how else we're going to get it, because sometimes we go very long spells. But it is a very different kind of agriculture. My mom died when I was 14, and I had 3 younger brothers. And I told my dad I was not going to stay in Banner County, which has less than 800 people in it. I was not going to be in agriculture, and I was not going to marry a farmer. And then I went off, and after a few years, I put myself through night school at the University of Nebraska, working for a United States Senator who served on the U.S. Senate Ag Committee. And that helped me know something was missing in my life, and it was being a part of agriculture, because I became kind of like the ag liaison for all 93 counties in Nebraska. And I want to share with you that my dad, for years, when I was doing this politics thing, would say, when are you going to get a real job? So of course I was very excited to tell him when I got a job offer after working for the senator for 8 years, that I was going to work as a lobbyist for the Nebraska Rural Electric Association. And he said, you call that a real job? I have no idea what my dad would say about what I do now. But for me, doing politics and being around people and with people, and especially in the good old days when I did door knocking, because get out the vote was one of the things I did. I just love the idea of the clash of ideas, but in a very collegial kind of way. And in the state of Nebraska, as it should be across the nation, food and agriculture was not a political issue. It was one of the most bipartisan issues that there are, which suggests a lot about the Farm Bill and how that became the federal policy that to this day still dictates policy, programs, and spending allocations for food and agriculture. Rapid forward, after leaving Nebraska, where Johnny Carson would tell funny jokes. Might show am I the only person that remembers that?
No.
First, there were like bricks and toilets, like this drought thing, sitting there in Lincoln, Nebraska, like, bricks and toilets, what's with that? And then there was this little bug, the medfly, and sending helicopters in. Well, I have some friends here, new friends, who know the person who was in charge of the program when the medfly came in the 70s, and we were about to lose all of our markets, domestic as well as national. It was a huge, big deal. One of my mentors, Rich Rominger, who was Secretary of Agriculture at that time and went on to be a Deputy Secretary for the United States, just told the governor, we have to get rid of this. Not only are we losing markets, they're going to shut us down. We can't ship out of state. We won't be able to ship across the world. But if we let the medfly become established here, there are many crops we will never be able to grow again. That's how devastating it is. And the worst part about the medfly is that you cannot see that it's done something to the fruit because it burrows in until you cut your fruit open and there's maggots in it. I'm sorry, but this is the lovely part that I get to do. It's the behind the scenes stuff that you should be glad I'm taking care of it for you. But I tell that story because I can't believe that I'm in the position to not only know a lot about medflies and every other invasive pest you can imagine, but right now I'm also in the midst of H5N1. Go figure how we can have H5N1, which is avian influenza in dairy cows, but we do, and we also have them in poultry right now. And it's becoming very established in the wild bird population. So it's that kinds of things when we talk about we're proud to protect agriculture. It's not like I'm an advocate trying to get things done for the good of agriculture. It's because it's very critical that we protect this fabulous natural agricultural resource base that allows us in the state of California, bless you, dear, that allows us to be able to grow on an annual basis as many as 400 different kinds of crops. We've been blessed with these deep soils, with this Mediterranean climate, as long as we can protect that, that allows us to plant and nurture and harvest crops practically every day of the year in almost every county of California. It is an incredible thing. Combine that, these natural resources, with a highly engineered water system of understanding that if we can capture water from slowly melting snowpack that feeds into our reservoirs and is transferred through thousands of miles of canals to put water on land, we can do this. Well, some of those things are changing, so I'm going to spend some time on climate. But being able to do what we do makes us very unique, not just across the United States of America, but also in the world. We are one of only 7 Mediterranean climates, which allows us to grow crops that don't grow in many places. It is a state where our diversity of landscape, 25 million acres in agriculture, 8 in cropland. The rest of that is our beautiful rangeland. It is California that is #1 in dairy, 20%, almost 20% of the milk, which makes a lot of products, comes from California. We are, proud to say still, the 4th largest wine producer in the world after Spain, Italy, and France. It's okay to drink other countries' wines. Makes you love your domestic product even more, I'm sure. I do like New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, by the way. But we also, we grow almost 85% of the world's almonds. We are, in this country, we're 2/3 of the tree nuts and fresh fruits and half of the vegetables. If someone in this country had a salad at lunch today, there's more than a 50% chance it came from Salinas and California. But in the wintertime, Our leafy greens and our winter melons all come from what we call the Yuma Valley, which is Imperial County in Yuma in Arizona. 90% of those products are grown in that spot in the wintertime. So we're able to deliver this healthy, nutritious food across the country and around the world every day of the year because we've got these wonderful natural resources. We have lots of innovation. We have lots of publicly funded research through the land-grant university system, University of California, well-known, all 11 campuses, as well as the CSU system, and then some of the best private institutes, Stanford and others, that are contributing to the wealth of scientific knowledge. But what makes the land-grant university so unique is that it is about research that then, because it's part of a land-grant university, it has a public mission of research, education, and public service. Cooperative extension, having someone translating the findings on the campuses and in the laboratories to practical uses in the field is a unique trait to the United States of America. Other countries would love to have a cooperative extension system that worked as well as ours does. And it's because food is so vital and what agriculture contributes to the lifestyle of every person. The land-grant university system is publicly funded agricultural research. And I stress that because all the things that we enjoy, the benefits of what we enjoy, are dependent upon new science and new technology and trust. Consumer trust is probably the most valuable commodity that we deal in, and you can lose it rapidly. And as we have seen over the years with cutbacks to publicly funded research at our universities, a vacuum is filled and people depend more and more and more on industries and brand names and others to fund it. And I think that's a contributor of many to the declining trust in our food system. But think about not being able to trust your food. Some of the early trade missions that I did for the state of California were to China 11 years ago, where food safety is top of mind for the people of that country. It was right after some of the pet food issues, as well as the baby formula issues. People look to California as a gold standard in best practices, in food safety, environmental stewardship, and labor standards. Now, when you talk to a farmer, they're going to talk about how overregulated they are. And if you are a farmer and there's 160 regs that you're supposed to know all about and pray that you're in compliance for, there are a lot of regulations. But I would also say it is the oversight of the state of California on the things that really are core to what we stand for as people, our values, as well as our care for our neighbors, our environment, our animals. Those are the things that are very unique to California and have established this gold standard of what we produce for its quality and these standards that we farm to. So that's enough of my pitch. I could go on and on and on about our $59 billion industry. We've been #1 since the United States Department of Agriculture has measured agricultural productivity. That $59 billion is just the gross revenues that come at the farm gate. That's not capturing the full food supply chain, which goes all the way from every input and all of the ways we add value, including regulatory compliance and labeling and shipping it and getting it to the ports. That full supply chain is easily at least 3 times more than what it is that is reported just at the farm gate. And every farmer would want you to know, please, that's the gross revenue. And right now we have skyrocketing input costs so that our margins are getting really, really squeezed. The percent of what a farmer gets out of the food dollar has been at 7% since the 1950s. My brother just sent me his disturbance for the day. His wife had some surgery. She really likes cream of wheat. He's a wheat farmer. So he went to the store to get her a box of cream of wheat. $6.57. Makes about 60 servings, and it wasn't even a pound box. Wheat prices yesterday were in Kimball, Nebraska, were $4.62 a bushel, and a bushel is 60 pounds. And he's like, where did like, where did that go? Because everybody thinks that we're causing food inflation. It's that long, there's a lot of hands dipping into this pot. So I just wanted to lay that out there as a very interesting aside, but let me talk a little bit more about California and California agriculture and what the role of the department is, because I think it's interesting to me. Some of it's icky. That's okay. Somebody's got to do it. I'm known as the queen of cow power, because it's not just the milk we're getting from our cows. Cows make a lot of poo. They eat a lot and belch a lot. All of that, but guess what we're doing nowadays? We are turning that manure into renewable electricity, renewable natural gas, and we have the first dairy in the United States that is now using that cow power for hydrogen, and Fresno County's charging some of their new hydrogen buses at that farm. This is the power of innovation and thinking about, why do we have waste in our vocabulary? Most of what we produce can be repurposed, and especially on a farm. The farm byproducts, as well as what we get out of processing when we do tomato processing. We're the world's 4th largest. No, actually, we're one of the largest tomato processing countries, states in the world. And all that processing creates a lot of pulp and skin and all those kinds of stuff, which we can take back out to the fields and work it into the soil as organic matter. That's really better than fertilizer. It's bio-based and it's better than fertilizer. These are the possibilities when we stop thinking of waste as waste. And in a time where we have a mandate in the state of California to divert up to 75% of organic waste out of landfills, where it creates methane gases, which are short-lived climate pollutants that are so powerful, we could be like drawing that back and doing stuff with it. It's an exciting time to be in agriculture. And in some ways, it's going back to the beginning and back to the future, because it is new science and technology that is allowing us to really figure it out. I'm saying that because I'm standing under, I was an English major. I'm very proud of that. But I really value science. I just know that that has a lot to do with chemistry. And when you talk to some of these young people that talk about conversion technologies, I'm like, golly gee whiz, why didn't I know about that when I didn't want to be in agriculture? Because that's very cool stuff. So what we're going to be able to do, thanks to campuses like this up and down the state of California, is, I think, continue to lead the world on environmental solutions, and especially solutions for climate, which we're spending a lot of time on. So let me talk a little bit more about California Ag that I oversee. So I'm going to just run through the departments that we have, and there's some people here who worked for the department, and they're going to correct me when I turn this over to questions from all of you. So the largest division of the Department of Food and Agriculture is our plant health and pest exclusion detection programs. Yeah, see, I saw you come in. I knew this was going to be up there. It's our largest because as much as people like California for our climate, over 50% of the cargo that lands at one of our ports is destined to go across the country. And a lot of stuff comes in on those wooden pallets or in those boxes or on those products. And so it's very important that we work closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that if something's coming in, we can find it and we exclude it, send it back, or when we have to, eradicate it. And that's a big function of what we do. Having healthy plants in our nursery programs is about getting the healthiest plants, the integrity of our seeds. So you're starting with good, healthy plants as a way to have them use less pesticides and other inputs. But the job that we do is about keeping invasive pests out of the state that can not only destroy crops, but also huge impacts to our natural environment. When we think about all the woody pests that are bothering our forests, the tree canopies, there's all kinds of pests that we find in the state of California, the only state that has 16 border stations. And I know many of you are going to say, well, they just flagged me through. Well, we have had to, because of the volume, really do what is where the highest risk is. It's going to be moving vans. It's going to be cargo that's coming in. It's going to be things that are from states, like right now where the spotted lanternfly on the East Coast is. It has devastated the tree corridors in many of those places. And it is hard to find because its egg masses look like a splat of mud on a truck or a train car. But we've been able to stop them because our border stations know what to watch for and where the highest risk, like cargo and trucks are. So if you've got an apple in the car and you want to declare it, that would be very nice, but the chances are buying one apple at the Safeway to have a little munchie, it's okay. So don't feel guilty if they flag you through and you know that you've got an apple or an orange in the back seat, okay? But that's also why the United States Department of Agriculture has the Beagle Brigade and other dogs that are sniffing, because there are certain countries that pests easily come in. And most times people are not intentionally putting a lot of stuff in their suitcase that they shouldn't. But if you could see the kinds of things that they find, I mean, if you ever get a chance to do the San Francisco airport and ask them for a behind the scenes, what does the Animal Plant Health Inspection Services find? You will see stacks and stacks of fresh fruits and meats that are not supposed to be coming in, but also critters. I mean, we get enough pests. Florida gets enough exotic, like reptiles and stuff. I'm going to let Florida have their stuff and I'll take the pests. But it's amazing what people will put in a suitcase and think everything's fine until the beagle, being the good ambassador that they are, starts sniffing, knowing they're going to get a reward if they found it. And then they open the suitcase and they do. That's a lot of what we do. Now, I started out telling you my story about the medfly and what's with California and the bug. So the way we treated medfly at that time to eradicate it, because it was becoming so pervasive, it was in many, many regions, we launched black helicopters that sprayed malathion in urban areas. That ruined a lot of paint jobs. But also think about being in San Jose or LA and it's nighttime, black helicopters, think about that. And what came out of that is working with world experts. We now do spray planes over LA basin every day. They're releasing sterile insects, sterile medflies. We'll just let those little buggers try to breed themselves into like extinction, okay? How about that sterile fly technology? Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? We have facilities in Hawaii that breed these things and irradiate them. Is it irradiation? Yeah, it's irradiation. And there's also facilities in Guatemala. It's been very, very successful. And we've done that on several other species. And it's like, it's an amazing thing, but it's understanding the biology and finding better ways of doing those kinds of things. I'm very proud that that's one thing that we've contributed to the world. Thank you, California. And we have a lot of innovative people do it. We also, for a lot of our pests, do what we call biological predator pests, where we have people who have traveled to the origin country of the invasive pests that we've gotten or don't want to get, and finding a natural predator. And most of them are little tiny species of wasps that actually attack the other pest, and voila, nature's taking care of itself. It's the cycle of life, I guess. There always has to be somebody that's going to be lunch for the day, right? So that's a little bit about our plant program there. Animal program, this is the one that's dealing with the H5N1 right now, is about protecting the health of our animals, because when an invasive disease attacks the animal population, it's such large numbers that are at risk that it can be devastating. And so we have a lot of inspection programs. It's also our animal health that does milk, meat, and egg safety programs. It's also where we now have a brand new program. Anybody remember Prop 12? Anybody want to complain about bacon prices? Anybody remember voting on that proposition where we set the housing standards for laying hens and for pigs? And the next year, the legislature followed up with a law to make it not just what we grow here, but what we bring in from other states. And a year and a half ago, the Supreme Court, it took us all the way to the Supreme Court, voted in our favor that the state had the right to do that. It was by a voter proposition. At that time, Prop 12 passed by the most votes of any other initiative in history. That's how much people in the state care about how animals are cared for. So we now have inspectors that can go to other states to make sure they're in compliance. It's a big capital investment, but they want to be in this market because there's a considerable premium. And you know that if you have purchased bacon or pork chops lately. We also are the first state to have a law to really try to minimize the use of antibiotics in animals. There's a concern that that was contributing to antimicrobial resistance, and so we have a very innovative program for that. We also have inspection services, which houses all of our quality inspection programs so that we really helped establish, like when you pick oranges from California, they're always at a maturity, because if you give somebody bad fruit, they might not try it again. And so that's been part of really building the demand for what we have there. So we have lots of inspection programs. The first ever organic program, certified organic program, was created here in California. That we housed that. That led to the National Organic Program, first ever certified farmers markets. And that's where we have our fertilizer regulatory program. And our newest program is Farm to Fork, which houses nutrition programs, double bucks to get more fresh fruits and vegetables into everybody's healthy bodies. And our Farm to School program, which is championed by our first partner, which has now invested $86 million. We now have 49.5% of all school students are in schools that are doing more farm fresh and freshly prepared. We're not just investing in supporting local procurement for small scale and historically underserved farmers. We're also investing in culinary arts, because you can tell a kid it's healthy, and if it doesn't look appealing and it doesn't taste good, they're not going to eat it, and then it's not really healthy for them. It is one of the most exciting and rewarding things I've ever been able to work for. And so I'm really excited that we'll be able to keep that program going. We also have marketing services, which has all kinds of commodity boards and commissions where people assess themselves to do research and marketing and promotion and problem solving kinds of things. We also have fairs and expositions. So if you've gone to a fair lately, they're mine. But over the last decade, we've seen that those facilities are hugely important for emergency response with wildfires. During COVID, they served a lot of different functions. We house that as well. And we have the Division of Weights and Measures. One of the first functions of government was, there is a weight somewhere in Paris. I think I need to do a field trip. Y'all want to go with me? The first true measure, weight, to make sure that a consumer was getting what they paid for by quantity. It's very precise. If you think, well, you could say that's interesting or not, you should hear my guys talk about the golly gee whiz setting the standards for weights and measures and getting it all so precise. It seems like it'd be so easy. It's not. But what's interesting is that's one of the original functions of government. But my little division of weights and measures is also what is helping us expand electric vehicles. We also are doing this. It used to be just a gas station where you see the sealers. That's our function. Well, it used to be just gas, and now it's alternative fuels, and it's electricity, and it's hydrogen. We're the ones that develop the standards so that no matter where you buy it, everybody is doing those same standards, and oftentimes we're creating those standards here. And we're the ones that made sure that rideshare, whether you got in an Uber once or 50 times, or a Lyft once or 50 times, and now taxis are doing it too, we would send inspectors out based on complaints because people would go exactly the same distance on the same route and pay a different price. It was an IT solution that we came up with that now is like Flywheel's one of those apps, I think, that you can accurate. So my little division, over 100 years old, now doing that. Those are just a few of the things. I haven't even told you about inedible kitchen grease, have I? Inedible kitchen grease. Restaurants, they have these bins. That's where all the cooking oil goes, because we certainly don't want it in our drains. Well, when I got back from DC, one of the first meetings I had was with the CHP commander, because all of a sudden it was a valuable commodity, a waste commodity that was being recycled into biofuels. And it had a value on it, and people were stealing it like crazy. Go figure. So those are just a few of the things. I wanted to make sure I left time for questions. I've got like 10, 15 minutes for that.
Yep.
So I'm just going to close with the value of what we do in California agriculture is so much more than just the food that we produce. And food for me is a connector. It's a passion of mine. I think we learn so much about each other, like no matter how different we are, by sitting down and sharing a meal with an adult beverage or a glass of milk. But as long as it's California grown, I'm not going to like complain about it. Food is such an important connector. But what farmers do every day with this unbelievably talented workforce, farm workers and all the others in it, it is about caring for the land. And the work that we're doing for climate is really recognizing we were the first state to have the goals that we have for climate. We're the first state that has a natural working land strategy, the understanding that only in agriculture and forestry can we be part of the solution because we can draw down carbon and store it in our soils. So we have, over the last decade, over $1 billion across all agencies are going into this farm economy to help make the transition to carbon neutrality by 2045. We have an on-farm water use efficiency program that not only is reducing energy use and lowering greenhouse gas emissions, it's saved in the last 10 years 1.5 million acre-feet of water, which is like 74 Olympics pools. We have our Healthy Soils program, which is really exciting when we think about all the biodiversity that's in our soils. If we feed our soil better, it will feed us for years and years and years, and it improves water holding capacity and nutrient cycling. We have our alternative manure management program, because not everybody's going to put in a digester, and the digester program. We've funded pollinator habitats, and we are replacing old engines and diesel engines to really be a part of cleaning up our air in addition to addressing climate change. So what we do on these lands is vitally important to the quality of life for our neighbors, for our workers, and for everyone here. And more importantly, the work that we're investing in, a new approach to economic development in the state of California, we've branded it as California Jobs First. And it's not like the historic way of doing economic development was one size fits all, and the state has a plan. Well, what we did was fund 13 different regions to bring everybody together, to really focus on the new economy that leaves no one behind. And I will use an example of Fresno, and it's really great leadership in Fresno, where they kept bringing people together. Like, the greatest, most productive ag in the universe is centered in the Central Valley. Central Valley also has some of our highest pockets of poverty, lower education, lower wages, not enough full-time jobs. You cannot reconcile these two things. If you're going to transition to a new economy, don't do it in a way that leaves a lot more people behind. This is about inclusive, equitable approaches and sharing a vision that works for that region. I am proud to say the first and the largest economic Development Administration grant from the federal government was to Future of Food Initiative, F3, Fresno, Merced, joining together to focus on agricultural technology, agroecology, to make sure that we're really doing the best that we can, and food entrepreneurship. That's pretty cool. They're like, most people try to walk away from something that they call legacy, which is ag. They're embracing it better. Another one is headquartered out of Modesto. It's called Beam Circular, and it's all about that circular economy, which is so golly gee whiz. They just got $30 million venture capital invested into their fund to really start more entrepreneurs to look at things like recycling, on-farm plastics and things like that. I mean, I'm really excited about that one. But one of the most successful regional approaches at this is right here, Valley Vision. Y'all heard of Valley Vision? I mean, I knew them from the broadband initiative, and they continue to do great work on broadband. But also Ag Tech and Ag Start is headquartered in Woodland because of this connection to Davis. And they were the ones that helped bring together farm to fork for the 5-county region, which at the time I was very concerned was just going to be a slogan. It's not. I mean, if you could hear the plans for Tierra Madre for next year, bringing it back from Italy, I'm telling you, we are the farm to fork capital. We grow the best food. We make some pretty darn good wines. But it's about bringing people together. And my friend Rick over at Cordy Brothers is always lecturing me, food is the new detente. We can bring people together. I've started a lot of collaborations by bringing people together, the willingness to break bread, so to speak, and start to find out all the things we have in common and use that as a way to focus on problem solving. It, to me, is one of the most magical things about what I get to do. I don't know what you wanted, Deanna, but this is what I felt like talking about, because I got to go back and call a few people on H5N1. But I would love to hear your questions and your comments. I would love that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, in another class yesterday, they presented.
Oh, sorry. Here. Oh, do it.
Yeah.
This one? Is that one
I
working?
don't think it is.
Well,
Grab that one.
I'll do this one. I know. This is great. Oh, did they get one? Okay. Oh, you're the lucky one. She's right here. No, she was right here. Oh, what's your question, honey?
You can hear me. I'll use it. Yesterday, in another.
Two questions. Did you marry a farmer? And two, I was a beekeeper. So are there research funds going to like UC Davis entomology to try and do something about the varroa mite
Yeah.
infestation?
Yeah, so it was right after I left USDA, because I was the one that told Secretary Vilsack about it. More than a decade ago, there was a roadmap put together by Agricultural Research Service on what was impacting bees and the health of bees and the decline of bees. And it was about forage for them and nutrition. It was about varroa mite, was just one of many insects that they have. And so a bunch of money got put into Agricultural Research Service, which really houses a lot of that, including a new bee center. It's in North Dakota. That's where a lot of the hives come from for pollination. When almonds are in bloom, I mean, that's all about being the biggest pollinator habitat project in the world. And so there's lots of money coming through federally that's still going in through a number of other universities as well. But that's where a lot of that work has been headquartered because of how vital it is to that. So yes, there's lots of money going into that. Thanks. Pardon?
Did you marry?
Oh, the quite opposite. Anybody who knows my husband knows that. First time he went to the farm with me, he was from a small town in Tennessee. It's called Murfreesboro, which at the time he had like 500 students in his graduating class, and now it's one of the fastest growing counties in the country. And I had 32, which made my class the second largest graduating class from Banner County High School.
Yes, hi. First, just a comment, then a quick question. I think that you typify examples of the many things that government does that the average person never even thinks about, but really does benefit their life in many ways. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
My question is related to the extreme challenge California is facing with regard to groundwater overdraft and agriculture. And I'm wondering whether your department is dealing with that issue at all, whether that's entirely Department of Water Resources. And if you are dealing with it in any way, could you explain briefly what you're doing?
Yeah, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I can't believe I could talk about ag without talking about water. In 2014, I'm sorry, she's had her hand up for a very long time. In 2014, and that was my first historic drought. We sat down with the governor to talk about groundwater management. And the first thing he said was, but I tried that on my first term, but it was a different situation because the farmers themselves, who were neighbors to what was going on, themselves said, we need to do something. Now we're 10 years, our 10th anniversary of SGMA is this year, and we're in the midst of implementation. So groundwater sustainability agencies have already established an allocation, which is already showing that this is how much water you have until we get our basin back into. That's ongoing. We have had a number of those plans that were deemed appropriate and have been reviewed that these should, with progress, continue to get you into sustainability. And we have some that are on probation, and we still have some under review after DWR. If they deem that it's not adequate, it goes to the State Water Board, which most people don't want to have happen. So all of that's going on. What's happening right now is a lot of land prices are going down. If you don't have secure water, meaning you're in a white area where you don't have any surface water at all, and you're only pumping, those land values are starting to go down, and some of those orchards are starting to go out. I'll just say there was a huge change. When I moved to the state, we had about 1.5 million acres of cotton. And we had less than 200,000 acres of almonds. And at that time, there was a drought, and people said, we need to use our water for high-value specialty crops. Well, that's what we did, because last year we had about 1.6 million acres of cotton, and we might have gotten up to 200,000 acres of cotton. That's that. But what trees and vines do is harden our water demand, and you can't just fallow that field for a year without killing the tree, which is a huge capital investment. That's been the change that's going on, and I think we'll continue to see cropping patterns change, but it is a very painful process that agriculture is going through right now, because we're trying to live and rebalance within what nature has given us and what the system itself can do.
If that works, Jay. Yeah. Is it working? No.
My question is a little different. Yesterday, I was in a class where they gave us the economic forecast for California, if indeed the immigration situation goes the way someone is saying it will go. Anyway, it was 60 billion, I think, in revenue, but what they also calculated was the owner will not be paying the same taxes because they won't have the same income. Plus the immigrants all pay into the taxes as well, and they will not. And so California would not only lose our agricultural standing, but also have a huge deficit problem. And I wondered what your view was on this whole immigration and how.
Well, first of all, since my first day as president of California Winegrape Board, bring legal status and people who are here and have been here. Many of them have purchased homes. They've got first and second generation kids that are going to college. And it is just agriculture more than 15 years ago stepped up and said, we acknowledge that we don't have proper verification documents. And they worked with the United Farm Workers to really, and the faith community, to put together a plan that's still holding that coalition together. And that's what was in the proposal that Langford did with, who was the Democrat, Coons? Was it with Coons?
Yes.
That they tried to put through. It had that very same ag jobs thing in that. We are very dependent on that. What is happening now is people are investing more in automation, and automation is becoming more viable for even things like tree fruit, robotic pickers. We're doing a lot of robotic pruning. That's where a lot of labor costs are. What that is, and this is what Jobs First is about, is like, if you're going to make the transition to automation, don't wait till you've got the gadgets or you'll have the same openings. You need to start from day one with training so that everybody gets to be a part of different jobs, better jobs. So we're putting a lot into automation because, well, who knows what's going to happen on immigration reform. Yeah.
Hi. I am a big fan of fine dining, so you can imagine that living in the farm to fork capital is a little slice of heaven, right?
Cool.
Yeah. However, at the risk of alienating myself to the entire room,
You don't like California wine?
are we ever going to get foie gras back?
Get what?
Foie gras.
Okay, you and Patrick Mulvaney are the caucus of two on that, right?
I mean, is that a question even in your arena? Will it ever come back?
Well,
It's crazy. You can go around the rest of the world.
it passed, although it didn't pass by initiative. It's part of how much we care about animal care standards in this state. And so I'm
Other
sorry to tell you that you just have to keep taking trips outside of the state of California if you really need a foie gras fix.
Yeah.
That's it?
Other questions? No.
Oh, here. Okay.
I have three really fast ones and you can
Okay.
pick. How do you feel about
us selling.
No, you just need to hold it up to you.
How do you feel about other countries buying our farmland? What happened to the onions? And what's the number 2 state if we're number 1?
Thanks. So, quite truthfully, there's not a lot of foreign acquisition of land in California or in the country. It is very, very minimal. And I will tell you that for decades, agriculture is very capital intensive, and there's a lot of pension plans and insurance companies that historically have been big centers of capital because they're not looking for the highest, fastest return. They're looking for slow, steady returns. And so one of the biggest protesters on all of this has been like Canadian Teachers Retirement Fund. So we need capital, but they're not buying the land. What they do are they tend to work with local people to put together a consortium. But as far as China buying land, I think the biggest foreign landowner in California, and it's all about forestry, is, I want to say, Sweden. And it's an individual from Sweden. It's not a government. So that's that one. I think, but I shouldn't put that out as fact. It's not China. Yeah. What was your second question? Sorry, I talked myself out of it.
What's the number 2 state if we're
Oh, number 2 state is Iowa. So California last year was 59, was like 59, a little over 59 billion. Iowa's 47 billion. And then after that, it goes between Texas and Nebraska. That's usually right around 35, 36, and then it drops into the teens for the rest. And then onions. Right now, we do the Food Safety Modernization Act work for the Food and Drug Administration. So we do a lot. We have a lot of experience in food safety, leafy greens in particular. The onion thing right now, they're still tracing back. This was Taylor Farms, which is a fabulous family company. And they have shared more findings that they've done their own research. They have growers in other states, and they have put production facilities in other states to be closer, because a lot of the food dollar is transportation. And so their Colorado Springs facility was what was packing it. They're still tracing it back to which farms. That's still a work in progress. However, if you know very much about onions, onions are underground. They cut them out, so there's a cut, and then you trim it off. There's a cut, which creates an opening. Then they field dry them, they cure for a couple of weeks, and then they go into wooden bins and gunny sacks, and then they go into storage for who knows how long. So I can't tell you what exactly is going on. I'm just saying those could be pathways, but the scale of this one is very confounding, and it's too early in the process to be able to trace it back. But every time we get a food safety scare like this, we do whole genomic tracing and testing. And every year, even if we don't have final answers, we know more than we did before about what caused it, how to get to it faster. And the Food Safety Modernization Act is about prevention, not waiting for an incident to happen and responding. It's trying to get to how do we teach every farmer to deal with where are all the risks. There's hazards and there's risks, and we're trying to prevent the risks. Yep. Yep, I can hear.
Okay. As we see solar farms popping up, what is this doing for agriculture? Are there cooperative harvests or produce that can be grown and harvested with the solar farms compatibility?
Yeah, so agrivoltaics is a very interesting topic because the panel configuration is such that there are possibilities of doing certain crops. And in fact, some of them might even stay cooler and use less water, and there'd be less evapotranspiration. Very early, not a lot of work on agrivoltaics has been done in California for California's climate. So that's yet to be seen. Right now, we'll see with the estimate that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act could take as many as 1 million acres out of production. I don't think that'll all be permanent fallowing, but there will be several 100,000 or maybe more acres that won't be farmed anymore. So as a landowner, landowners are getting approached by every large-scale solar developer you can imagine, which is great. But guess what? All of that activity that comes with all the activities to plant and buy services and products just to keep ag going, let alone all the value added, none of that benefit will be realized in communities, but the landowner will get a coupon payment. And so and land use is a local authority, which will make this very challenging. But right now, the competition between warehouses and solar panels up and down Central Valley is where a lot of land is going. And my grandma taught me early on, they're never going to make more farmland. So we lose a lot of acres every year. And it is forcing us to really think about how do we grow as much as possible, as efficiently as possible on a smaller footprint, which will use less resources and a lot of work. And that's where UC Davis and other institutions are doing tremendous work to really help us continually to improve, including the quality and the nutrition aspect of the food.
Karen, there's a couple of online questions.
Okay.
What has happened with the water heist document and Monterey agreements from the Kern Water Bank?
Okay, so
I have
that's
no
somebody that
idea.
was in water. Who is this person? No, just kidding. I think I know that person. I think the water heist is for the online person is the water heist about what happened to the forecasting for runoff 3 years ago and the drought. At that time, and this is where we knew climate change is now. We had forecast using our historic models, with all that data, 800,000 acre feet of runoff that would come into the reservoirs. And because of the previous year's hotter, drier temperatures and the drought, we got zero runoff that year because the soil profile was so dry, the watershed absorbed it, which is why we have to think about water from the mountaintop all the way to the beach and how do we have healthier meadows upstream. But hotter, drier future, we know we'll have 10% less available water just because of evapotranspiration. So I think that's what that person, and that's been proven. The Monterey Accords were done during the Pete Wilson administration, I believe. They were yet another chapter of trying to get people to work together instead of fighting all the time. I don't know that there's any validity to, but that was all trying to get people to come together, like what our rice growers are doing with a lot of the environmental groups in the Sacramento Valley. And the last one was voluntary agreements.
Actually, the last one was a kind of a comment, but I will read it. Do people know how important almonds are as a food source versus wine?
Can my friends from the Almond Board of California put that in?
That's nuts.
Okay, that was definitely a comment. No, not me. Okay, let's thank Karen for this. Amazing information. I learned so much.